The space opera subgenre literally saved Hollywood. When Star Wars hit theaters in 1977, the film industry was dying. Then suddenly, studios were throwing millions at anything with starships. But here's the shocker. Most critics in 1977 didn't even consider Star Wars a real science fiction film. They called it fantasy in space, a glorified Flash Gordon knockoff. So what actually makes a great space opera? Let's blast off into the 15 greatest space operas ever put to film. Star Wars, 1977. George Lucas gambled everything on a film nobody wanted to make. The Adventures of Luke Starkiller was rejected by United Artists and Universal before Fox reluctantly greenlit it, slashing the budget multiple times. Studio executives watching early footage were horrified. One famously asked, "What is this weird crap with the giant dog driving a spaceship?" The film was such a mess that Lucas's friend Brian De Palma openly mocked the first cut, calling it the worst movie he'd ever seen. When Star Wars finally hit theaters, the cultural earthquake was immediate. Theater owners who had initially refused to show it were suddenly begging for prints. Some theaters played it continuously for over a year. The merchandise, which Lucas had shrewdly retained rights to when Fox thought they were worthless, made him a billionaire practically overnight. The American Film Institute ranks it the greatest science fiction film ever made, but many hardcore sci-fi purists still insist it's not real science fiction at all. Yet what Star Wars did, combining the Western samurai films, WW2 dogfights, and Flash Gordon serials, created a blueprint that filmmakers are still following nearly 5 decades later. Alien, 1979. Ridley Scott pitched it as Jaws in space, but nobody could have predicted what emerged. The production design team, led by H.R. Giger, built sets so disturbing that crew members became physically ill while working on them. Giger's biomechanical aesthetic, mixing machine parts with sexual imagery, was so unsettling that 20th Century Fox executives tried to fire him. Sigourney Weaver wasn't even the first choice for Ripley. The character was originally written as a man. The notorious chest-burster scene remains one of cinema's most shocking moments. The actors weren't told exactly what would happen, only that something would emerge from Kane's body. Their horrified reactions are completely genuine. Veronica Cartwright actually passed out on set. When the film was submitted to the MPAA, they were so disturbed they created a special warning to accompany the R rating. Critics initially dismissed it as exploitative trash, but Alien has since been recognized as revolutionary, with the American Film Institute naming the xenomorph as the 7th greatest villain in cinema history. The Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry as a work of cultural, historical, or aesthetic significance. 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968. When Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece premiered, audiences walked out in droves. Rock Hudson famously stormed from the theater demanding, "Will someone tell me what the hell this is about?" MGM executives were convinced they had the biggest disaster in studio history on their hands. Critics called it boring, pretentious, and unwatchable. Then something strange happened. Young people started seeing it multiple times, often under the influence of mind-altering substances. The film's special effects, created without computers, still hold up today. Kubrick was so obsessed with scientific accuracy that NASA later admitted they studied his film to improve their own designs. The artificial intelligence Shell 9000 proved so convincing that MIT received serious inquiries about when such systems would be available. Arthur C. Clarke, who co-wrote the screenplay, claimed that Soviet Premier Alexei Kosygin requested a private screening and afterward asked if the Americans really had such advanced technology. The film's influence extended beyond cinema. Steve Jobs cited it as inspiration for Apple's design aesthetic, and astronomer Carl Sagan consulted the film before designing the Pioneer plaque, humanity's first message to potential extraterrestrial intelligence. Blade Runner, 1982. Ridley Scott's noir-drenched vision of 2019 Los Angeles bombed so spectacularly on release that it nearly ended his Hollywood career. Test audiences hated it. Studio executives forced Scott to add a ham-fisted voiceover and a happy ending, which Harrison Ford deliberately performed in a monotone to sabotage it. 7 different versions of the film exist, with the final cut not appearing until 25 years after the original release. The production was notoriously troubled. The set was constantly shrouded in artificial rain and fog, creating a toxic work environment that made the crew ill. Ford and Scott clashed so violently that they didn't speak for over 30 years afterward. Rutger Hauer rewrote his iconic Tears in Rain death monologue the night before, filming without telling Scott, creating what is now considered one of cinema's greatest scenes. The film's visual aesthetic has influenced everything from architecture to fashion, with designers like Yohji Yamamoto and Alexander McQueen creating collections directly inspired by its look. Despite initial failure, Blade Runner now regularly tops lists of the greatest science fiction films ever made and has been preserved in the National Film Registry. The Empire Strikes Back, 1980. The sequel nobody expected to surpass the original almost never happened. George Lucas, traumatized by the stress of directing Star Wars, handed the reins to his former film professor, Irvin Kershner. The budget ballooned from $8 million to $33 million, nearly bankrupting Lucas, who was financing it himself after Fox refused. The production was plagued by disasters. A massive snowstorm destroyed sets in Norway, and the Millennium Falcon prop collapsed on Ford's leg. The screenplay went through multiple rewrites, with the famous "I am your father" twist added so late that even James Earl Jones thought Vader was lying when he recorded the line. Critics initially gave it mixed reviews, with many calling it a disappointing follow-up. Time magazine declared it a lifeless copy of the original. Today, it's widely considered not just the best Star Wars film, but one of the greatest sequels ever made. The American Film Institute ranks it as the 8th most thrilling American film of all time. The "I am your father" moment has become so culturally embedded that it's frequently misquoted by people who've never even seen the film. Dune, 2021. After David Lynch's infamous 1984 adaptation crashed and burned, Dune was considered Hollywood's ultimate unfilmable novel. Multiple directors tried and failed to adapt it, including Alejandro Jodorowsky, whose spectacular failure became the subject of its own documentary. Enter Denis Villeneuve, who demanded complete creative control and the guarantee of a 2-part adaptation before signing on. Warner Brothers reluctantly agreed, then panicked when COVID hit and dumped it on streaming the same day as theatrical release. Against all odds, the film became a pandemic-era hit. Villeneuve created a world so immersive that actual scientists and engineers have studied its designs. The ornithopters, those dragonfly-like aircraft, were designed to be physically buildable with current technology. The languages in the film were developed by linguists who created over 200 pages of vocabulary and grammar. The voice, that mind control technique used by the Bene Gesserit, took sound designers months to perfect, layering over 30 different vocal tracks. Critics who had dismissed the source material as too dense for film were forced to eat their words when Dune won 6 Academy Awards and became the rare sci-fi film to receive a Best Picture nomination. Guardians of the Galaxy, 2014. Marvel took their biggest gamble on a script featuring a talking raccoon, a sentient tree who can only say 3 words, and a lead actor known primarily as the chubby guy from a sitcom. The studio was so convinced it would flop that they barely interfered with James Gunn's vision. Disney executives were reportedly horrified by early footage, with one asking, "Are we really making a movie with a raccoon holding a machine gun?" The film's success blindsided everyone, including Marvel. Chris Pratt, who had been rejected for roles in Star Trek and Avatar for being too fat, transformed his career overnight. The soundtrack, featuring obscure 70s hits on Awesome Mix Vol. 1, shot to #1 on the Billboard charts, the first soundtrack consisting entirely of previously released songs to ever do so. Vin Diesel recorded the line, "I am Groot," over 1,000 times in multiple languages, bringing such emotional range to those 3 words that crew members reportedly cried during his recording sessions. The film's success fundamentally changed Marvel's approach, encouraging them to take bigger risks with lesser-known characters and more distinctive directorial voices. The Last Starfighter, 1984. the film that almost bankrupted Universal Studios with its groundbreaking special effects. The Last Starfighter was the first film to use CGI for its spacecraft rather than practical models, a decision that caused the budget to explode from $10 million to over $21 million. The 27 minutes of computer animation took a staggering 300 years of CPU time to render on the most powerful computers of the day. Each frame took about 45 minutes to complete. Director Nick Castle, who played Michael Myers in the original Halloween, fought constant battles with studio executives who wanted to cut the effects budget. Steven Spielberg saw an early screening and tried to buy the film for his own production company, but Universal refused. The film's premise, a video game that secretly tests potential space pilots, was so appealing that actual arcade machines were built, but the technology of 1984 couldn't handle the gameplay, and they were never released. While only a modest success on release, The Last Starfighter gained cult status on home video and is now recognized as a pioneer in digital filmmaking. Every CGI spaceship you've seen since, from Star Trek to Marvel, owes a debt to this ambitious gamble. Serenity, 2005, a film that should never have existed. After Fox unceremoniously canceled Joss Whedon's space western series Firefly after just 14 episodes, 3 of which they didn't even air, fans launched an unprecedented campaign. They bought so many DVD sets of the canceled show that Universal Pictures, noticing the phenomenon, took the unheard-of step of greenlighting a film continuation of a failed TV series. The budget was tight. Just $39 million, barely half what most sci-fi films received at the time. Despite critical acclaim, Serenity struggled at the box office. The marketing department, unsure how to sell a film based on a show most people had never seen, created misleading trailers that alienated both fans and newcomers. The film's most shocking moment, the unexpected death of a beloved character, was so traumatizing to test audiences that Universal begged Whedon to change it. He refused. While commercially disappointing, Serenity has since been vindicated. In 2013, it ranked the 383 on Empire magazine's list of the 500 greatest films of all time. Perhaps most remarkably, NASA was so taken with the film that they named a section of Mars Serenity Valley after consulting with Whedon. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, 1982. The film that saved Star Trek from oblivion. After the critical and commercial disappointment of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, Paramount slashed the sequel's budget and considered relegating the franchise to television. Original director Robert Wise was fired, and producer Harve Bennett, who had never even seen the show, was brought in to save it. After watching all 79 original episodes, he decided to bring back the villain from a single episode, Khan Noonien Singh. The production was tumultuous. Leonard Nimoy only agreed to return after being promised a spectacular death scene. William Shatner, concerned about being upstaged, demanded equivalent screen time and emotional moments. Ricardo Montalban, reprising his role as Khan from the TV series, never actually shared a scene with Shatner. Their intense face-offs were filmed months apart. The film's most emotional moment, Spock's death and funeral, reduced hardened studio executives to tears during early screenings. Wrath of Khan not only revitalized the franchise, but established the even-numbered Trek films are good rule that would hold for decades. Its naval warfare and space approach revolutionized how space battles were filmed, influencing everything from Battlestar Galactica to The Expanse. The Fifth Element, 1997. French director Luc Besson began writing the story when he was 16 years old and spent 20 years developing it before cameras rolled. The production was the most expensive European film ever made at the time, with a budget of $90 million. Costume designer Jean-Paul Gaultier created over 1,000 unique outfits, most of which appear on screen for mere seconds. The divine language, spoken by Mila Jovovich's character Lilu, is a fully functional constructed language with over 400 words. The film was a massive hit in Europe but polarized American critics. Roger Ebert gave it one of his rare negative reviews, calling it an experience that depends on the volume being turned up to 11. The Hollywood Reporter declared it a vibrant, crazed gem of a movie. Bruce Willis took a massive pay cut to star in the film because he so believed in Besson's vision. Chris Tucker's flamboyant performance as Ruby Rhod was almost played by Prince, who backed out when he saw the revealing costumes. Despite its mixed initial reception in America, The Fifth Element has become a defining sci-fi film of the 90s, with its saturated color palette and maximalist design influencing everything from fashion to music videos to video games. Interstellar, 2014. Christopher Nolan's space epic began as a Steven Spielberg project before changing hands. Determined to minimize CGI, Nolan used practical effects wherever possible. The cornfield scenes weren't sets. Nolan actually grew 500 acres of corn because it would be cheaper than creating it digitally, then sold the harvest for a profit. The film's scientific accuracy was so important that theoretical physicist Kip Thorne served as both consultant and executive producer, writing scientific equations that the visual effects team rendered into the film's mind-bending black hole sequence. Those black hole visuals were so scientifically accurate that they led to the publication of 2 scientific papers. The water planet's massive waves weren't CGI but miniatures shot in a water tank. The robot TARS was primarily a practical puppet operated by comedian Bill Irwin, who was digitally removed in post-production. Hans Zimmer's organ-heavy score was recorded on the 1926 4-manual Harrison & Harrison organ at London's Temple Church, deliberately evoking religious overtones. The film's time dilation concepts sparked so much public interest in relativistic physics that several universities reported increased enrollment in physics programs the following year. Galaxy Quest 1999. The film that almost wasn't released. Disney's Touchstone Pictures had no idea how to market a sci-fi comedy that simultaneously parodied and celebrated Star Trek. The original cut received an R rating due to Sigourney Weaver's colorful language, forcing significant edits. Alan Rickman initially turned down the role of Alexander Dane 7 times before finally relenting. The studio wanted Jim Carrey for the Tim Allen role, but director Dean Parisot fought for the less manic Allen. The real Star Trek cast had varied reactions. William Shatner reportedly walked out of a screening halfway through, later claiming he didn't get it. Patrick Stewart refused to watch it until his fellow cast members forced him to, after which he called it brilliant. George Takei said it was better than most of the Star Trek movies. The film underperformed at the box office, but found its audience on home video. In 2013, at a Star Trek convention, Galaxy Quest remarkably won a poll for Best Star Trek Film, beating all the official entries. The film's legacy has only grown. In 2015, it was ranked 7th on Rolling Stone's list of the 50 best sci-fi movies of the 1990s, and a television adaptation has been in development hell for years. Arrival, 2016. Denis Villeneuve's Alien Contact film broke all the rules of Hollywood sci-fi. There are no space battles, no explosions, and the climactic moment involves linguistics rather than weapons. Based on Ted Chiang's short story, Story of Your Life, the film was considered such a risky proposition that it was rejected by every major studio before Paramount finally took a chance. The aliens, called heptapods, communicate through circular symbols that required the creation of an entire visual language system. Linguist Jessica Kuhn from McGill University served as consultant, ensuring the film's approach to language acquisition was scientifically sound. The circular alien writing was inspired by actual linguistic concepts like nonlinear orthography. Amy Adams' performance as linguist Louise Banks earned universal acclaim, but in one of Oscar's most notorious snubs, she wasn't even nominated. The film's nonlinear storytelling confused test audiences so thoroughly that the studio wanted to add explanatory title cards, which Villeneuve successfully resisted. Despite its cerebral approach, Arrival became a surprise commercial hit, grossing $203 million worldwide against a $47 million budget, proving that thoughtful science fiction could still find a mainstream audience. Moon, 2009. Sam Rockwell's tour de force performance in Duncan Jones' directorial debut was filmed on a shoestring $5 million budget in just 33 days. Jones, David Bowie's son, was a first-time director who convinced Rockwell to take the role during a meeting in a New York diner. The film's retro aesthetic was deliberately designed to evoke sci-fi classics like Silent Running and Alien, with miniatures and practical sets used instead of CGI. The lunar rovers were actually modified JCB diggers. The film's twist, that Rockwell's character is one of many clones, was almost revealed in marketing materials before Jones fought to keep it secret. Kevin Spacey recorded all of his dialogue as the robot Gertie in a single afternoon without ever seeing the film. Despite premiering at Sundance to rave reviews, Sony Pictures Classics gave it an extremely limited release, convinced there was no audience for thoughtful, low-budget sci-fi. They were proven wrong when Moon developed a passionate cult following on DVD and streaming, eventually grossing over 3 times its budget. Rockwell's performance, essentially acting against himself for much of the film, is now considered one of the great unrecognized acting achievements in modern sci-fi. So what makes these films still resonate, while $100 million space epics fade from memory within months? Maybe it's that true space opera needs to be more than just spectacle. It needs heart, vision, and something to say about humanity's place among the stars. What's your favorite space opera that didn't make our list? Is Dune really better than the original Star Wars? And here's the real question. Are we living in a new golden age of space opera, or has CGI killed the magic that made these classics so special? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into sci-fi cinema's greatest hits and hidden gems.